Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jerjian, and I'm here today to talk about sage advice in old age. And I've chosen Cicero as the fulcrum, if you like, the focal point of this talk. So why Cicero? Well, Cicero was such an important figure, not just in Rome, but also his influence in the Renaissance and also in the formation of the United States is just purely unbelievable. His contribution was such that he's the foundation of, if you like, democracy as we know it and the functioning of a free world. And that's why he's such an important guy. And when he writes a book, if you like, smallish as it was, book on old age, we have to take serious note. And why is that? Why do we take serious note about old age today, as opposed to, say, 100 years ago or 500 years ago? Well, the thing is that we live in a world post-COVID, that post-Trump, post-Brexit, that is incredibly uncertain and unstable. But this was the norm in Rome. This was the kind of normality. The last 70 years that we have had in the 21st century, 20th and 21st century, has been remarkably secure and certain, which is really not normal. We are now living in what is normal. And so that's why Cicero is so important. So when he talks about old age, we need to listen. And that's why I want to share this with you. So let me, without any further ado, just get the slide deck up. Now, who was Cicero? He was, in fact, born in Rome. He was not of the aristocratic families. He was actually very middle class. In fact, his own name means chickpea, which for people in those days and even today, people have surnames of the trade that their families were in. So we believe that his ancestors were chickpea sellers, simple as that. There's a joke that apparently one of his ancestors had a sort of a growth on his nose the size of a chickpea, and that's why he was called Cicero. But I think that's just a bit of a joke that was probably going around in Rome at the time, which was captured. But he was born in 106 BC and died in 43 BC. So this is kind of and he was a contemporary of Julius Caesar, Pompey, Caesar Augustus, Mark Antony. So you can see the sort of the arena that he was a player in. Now, he was a statesman, a senator, a lawyer, an orator, and a scholar. And he rose from very humble beginnings and reached the pinnacle. And his impact on our lives today is far more than, in my view, than Julius Caesar or Caesar Augustus, because he's in the foundational, he's kind of the foundation as opposed to just the top story, if that makes sense. Just like in music, the bass is the real power, the trumpet is just the noise. Or in perfume, there's a bass note and then there's the top note. The bass notes are always the foundation, the rock on which things are formed. So without further ado, what others have said about Cicero is also important. So I'd like to quote some of those. John Adams, one of the signatories of the US Constitution and also a president of the United States, said, "All the ages of the world have not produced a greater statesman and philosopher combined than Cicero." Voltaire, the French writer and historian and philosopher, said, "The greatest as well as the most elegant of Roman philosophers." And a Scottish professor at Oxford University, an academic and a British education system reformer, wrote, "Cicero created a language and style which 19 centuries have not replaced or altered." What a commendation is that? So what I'd like to do now is to talk about the book. It was called De Senectute, which means on old age. And he wrote this much later in life. And in that, he uses what Dante uses Virgil for in his Divine Comedy, which is he uses Virgil as a sort of the person who leads us into hell and purgatory and into heaven. He's kind of the person who's kind of our tourist guide. And so Cicero uses Cato in a similar fashion to explain what this is about. And the first thing that Cato, in the conversation Cato says to him is, or says to us as well, is that old age calls us away from active work. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. Secondly, it weakens the body. Now, I have my own interpretation of why it weakens our body. It's not that we're just getting old and our bodies get weaker. That's normal. But it's that how fast it gets weaker is because we stop active work. Now, we can retire, but we don't need to retire from work, but we don't need to retire from life. The third thing that Cato says, as it were, is it deprives us of almost all pleasures. And lastly, it is not far from death. Now, these are all fairly obvious comments, but sometimes they need to be in our face to wake us up, to alert us, to make us aware. And so that's why I share this one with you. But moving on, the solution to these problems that Cicero offers us through the medium of Cato is staying involved in your life is essential, even after retirement. You cannot pull away and withdraw from life. You're just withdrawing from your work. But this is a new age that you're entering in, and you need to stay involved. Secondly, mental activity and sharp memory hold back old age. So if you're fully engaged in your life, you're using your mind, you're being creative, you're doing stuff, that keeps mental activity. For example, just even learning a new language. Yes, it's not easy, but when you put something like that and you're learning, it keeps you sharp. It holds old age away. Third, decline of sexual passion in old age is the greatest blessing, which I think is hysterical, and we'll cover that a little later on. But decline of sexual passion. Sex is our life drive. And so when that declines, we need to channel it into something else, into something that gives us that verve. But we'll come back to that. And lastly, awareness of death makes us live more fully. And this is something we miss in the world that we live in today. Death is sanitized. Funeral directors and so on. COVID is the only thing that's forced us to recognize our mortality and therefore to live life more fully. So death is not something to be feared. Of course, it's natural to be afraid of the unknown, but if we are afraid, it's like if you're afraid of something, you stop breathing and that stops your life. So we can't be afraid of death. We've got to recognize it's going to come to all of us at some point or another, but we need to live our lives fully without fear. And that's what makes the knowledge of death, impending death, it compels us to live life more fully and not to mess about. So death is a doorway, is what Cicero essentially is saying. And I've got this beautiful picture of a door, bronze door, which was actually originally the door, the bronze door to the Senate in Rome. And of course, later on, with the emergence of the power of the Catholic Church, thankfully, these bronze doors were salvaged from the Senate and placed in the Basilica of St. John the Lateran in Rome. So this beautiful door to the Senate, which Cicero and all the Caesars and all the senators would have gone through, they would have gone through this door. So, but death is a doorway to something that we don't know and we can't express. But one thing we do know is that energy cannot die. Einstein told us that energy cannot die, it cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed. So in a sense, we need to understand that death is a transformation. So, we come in alone into this life and we leave alone. In between, we live our lives. How we live it is what's important. And so we need not be afraid of death. I don't speak as someone who doesn't know death. I myself had a rendezvous with death in January 2007, when I was diagnosed with a bone tumor and told I had 6 months to live. For 3 weeks, that was what I understood. I thought it was over. But actually what happened, thankfully, it was a benign tumor, and therefore I had 6 months of convalescence and learning how to walk again. But the point is, ever since January 2007, I have been living on bonus time. Technically, I should have died in January 2007. So all this time that I've had since then is bonus. And I make sure I try to enjoy each day as much as I can. I don't always succeed. I'm only human. But the point is, I have the right intention. So, Cicero has 10 lessons, and I'm just going to quickly go through each of those to try and expand on them to explain. Lesson number 1 is that a good old age begins at youth. Because you see, people who are reasonable, good-tempered and gracious will bear aging well. If you are stressed and angry and resentful and you haven't led a good life, you can hardly expect to live to a ripe old age and enjoy it, because you've been firing on all pistons in a negative way. However, if you've been firing on all systems in a positive way, that's a different thing altogether. So in youth, it's important that that's what we do. Our past determines our future. And he says clearly, those who are mean-spirited and irritable will be unhappy at every period of their lives. So you can't say, when I reach this point in my life, or when I achieve this, I will change. You won't. The only time you can change is now, right now, nothing else. Your past determines your future, so start the change today. Now, Cicero didn't have any understanding about manifestation and all the sort of mental things that we use today to change, but he understood that our thoughts determine who we are, and it's our thoughts that help us move forward. So, for example, where you are today has been predicated on what you were thinking in the last couple of years. If you change the way you think, you will change your future as well as your present. So your past determines your future. So start the change today. Lesson number 2, old age can be a wonderful part of life. Now, Ken Dickwald, who is a kind of a guru on old age and the age wave, says that there are 4 types of retirement. Sorry, let me backtrack. Retirement means different things to different people. Their circumstances and situation can change everything. And he literally puts people in 4 buckets, as it were. The first ones are the explorers, the people who have saved enough, money's not an issue, but they're not sitting on their laurels. These people want to do things with their lives. They're not ready to down tools and go to a slow death. They still have things they want to do and achieve. He calls these explorers. And they represent about 20%. Another 20% are the people who are, if you like, the comfortable people, the people who have saved enough, but who believe that now in retirement, they are resting and they're just going to relax and do very little. Then we have another lot that live today. Today's the only day you have. Great philosophy up to a point. But these folks don't prepare for old age. And obviously, as they age and they get older, they don't have sufficient income, they don't have sufficient savings, and their cart loses its wheels and they go off on all over the place. And they represent another 20%. The remaining 40% are in this unhappy situation of no money, no future, no life. And so old age doesn't look very pretty for them. But my argument is it should be, and it could be, it's a state of mind. If they change the way they think, they're going to change their outcome. It can be peaceful and serene and spent quietly, blamelessly, and with grace. We don't need to have huge activities. We just need to have a sense of community, a sense of, putting some bread on the table, and things can still be a lot better than if you didn't have this mindset change. Secondly, Plato lived this way into his last year, still writing when he died at the age of 81. Well, in our world, 81 is still a spring chicken, and it will be. So when we retire from work, we're not retiring from life. We need to change our mindset. We need to reassess our lives. We need to look at the things that we love to do, which we never got a chance to do. And we need to carve a new life for ourselves, but we need to plan it. We need a blueprint. We can't just take a risk and do all sorts of stuff without repercussions, without a plan. Old age should be the best part of our lives. So how are you spending each day? This is a very interesting concept. It should be the best part of our lives. But the last 70 years of consumerism has created this notion that when you reach a certain age, you're retired and you become a ghost. Nobody wants to know you. The advertising world doesn't know you. People don't see you, is what I hear a lot of people say. But this is because in the consumer society, old age has become disposable. And this is so far away from the truth of who we really are. And so we are responsible to ensure that does not happen to us. And for us baby boomers, we've led a revolution from the get-go, from the era that we were born. Boomers are a huge tribe, and they've set revolutions at every stage of their lives. Why shouldn't it be in this last stage? It's our destiny. We're meant to, and we're meant to show them how to do this to the younger generation. So, lesson number 3, there are proper seasons in life. The course of life cannot change. It is a single path and you travel it once. In other words, we can't go back and fix things. Whatever decisions we've made, good or bad, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. This is our journey. It's our karma. We have to go through this. And so we need to recognize that it's like a river flowing. That, you can't put your foot into a river it's not the same river. It's a different water that's coming through. Each stage of life has its own appropriate qualities. When you're young, you have physical strength. You can do so much. You have energy, you have love and lust and all sorts of stuff, right? But you don't have all that. As you grow older, you have a family, you take kind of less risks because you want to cater for them, or you take more risks if you need to cater for them. And so we're able to meander and maneuver with the resources that we have through life. And in old age, we have less energy, but we have more experience, and we need to apply it. These are fruits that must be harvested in due season. what are you harvesting? By harvesting is effectively all the experience you've had up to date. You need to bring it and use it. The skill sets you have, the experience you have, use it for something new. Use it for something that you love to do. It won't be work anymore. And that's the secret. It's not about doing nothing. When people retire from jobs they hate, they love the concept of retirement because it's nirvana. They think it's just going to be, they're going to be in heaven and everything's going to be hunky-dory, and it's not. Your body will start disintegrating. Your mind will start getting addled. We live in an ocean of motion. We live in a physical world that's in motion. And motion brings clarity. When we stop, we're like stagnant waters. We become impure. So we need to harvest what we had and do something new, but make sure that you're passionate about what you're doing. The course of life cannot change. And this is our life, if you like. You know, we carry the baggage that we came with, but we don't need to carry it. We can actually set the baggage down, baggage that is no longer any use to us. And we carry the rest that we're going to use in our journey going forward. But we cannot change the course of our life. At least we can't change the course of our past life. We can change how we go into the future. So lesson number 4, older people have much to teach the young. Now this must not resonate in today's world, because old people feel that what we know is now useless in this new world of technology, in this new brave new world. But the reality is technology is only one aspect of our lives, and that young people actually do need direction. And we need to be able to engage with young people, in a sense, developing a relationship and not one of imposing or oppressing things on them, but one of conversation. Trying things differently, gentleness, using your new skill sets, your new powers. Age gives us a different perspective on life, and we forget the insecurities of youth. And when they're arrogant, it's not because they're really arrogant, it's because they're insecure. And trying to understand that and short circuit that so you can get through to them. We have so much to teach them. Our lives have meaning. And it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, what socioeconomic group you're in. We do have a lot to teach the young. If nothing else, just about life's experience alone. Great deeds are done by wisdom, character, and sober judgment, qualities found in old age. For most of us, I would say that is true, not necessarily obviously for all of us, but I think as you age, you become wiser, more sober, and you have character because it's been forged in life's challenges. And that's the kind of experience I'm talking about, passing to younger people. But you can't do it from a sort of a master-servant relationship. It's got to be done with tenderness and with love. Our ancestors gave the name Senate, meaning elders, to our highest council for good reason. So a senator is a wise old person. Sene means old in Latin, and so that's why the sort of his book is called De Senectute, which means on old age. So it's true, older people do have experience and qualities found in old age, which you won't find in youth, because youth has a different journey. It's not about good or bad, it's about what you have to offer. And my question would be, where are you applying your wisdom, character, and sober judgment in your life today? So in retirement, think about this. How are you helping younger people? How are you sharing that experience you have? Don't wait for it to come to you. It won't come to you. You need to go out there and find it. This is a painting done about 150 years ago of Cicero speaking in the Roman Senate. I'm not sure that the woodwork in the Senate was quite so fabulous, but it's a lovely painting anyway. I wanted to share this with you to give you a sort of a feeling of Cicero himself. So lesson number 5. Old age need not deny us an active life, but we need to accept limitations. Perhaps obvious, but people don't always see this. They're either at one extreme or the other extreme, overcompensating or undercompensating. See, old age need not deny us an active life. We still need to be active because inactivity leads to catastrophe. Leonardo da Vinci talked about stagnant waters becoming pure, iron rusts from disuse, and an inactive mind is a disaster. So we need to accept our limitations, of course, because we do not have the strength that we had in earlier years, in our youth, but we still have some strength, and we still can have some active life. We mustn't give up on that. In fact, the more we do it within reason, within our limitations, the longer we can stay old age away. Old age can be very active, always doing and engaged in something. Being busy and active engages our mind, our spirit, our emotions, and our body. And by being active and engaged, it keeps ill health, it keeps everything away, because we're in the flow, we're in the energy. An old speaker loses power, but his voice becomes more melodious, mellifluous. So we need to hone in on what we have and sharpen that. We must fight against old age. This is something that is very, very true for us today, because a lot of people who retired are not fighting against ageism. And the interesting discovery for me is that actually younger people are not ageist. It's us boomers who are ageist. We're the ones who have this very poor reflection on old age. In a sense, I suppose, because we boomers were kind of the fount of youth back in the 60s, that we somehow don't like old age. In fact, I didn't like old age. I was sort of staying away from it as far as possible. I didn't want it to exist for me. It's only when you confront death and you realize that, you're getting on and you can't do the physical things that you could do before, that you slowly get to recognize your own mortality. But we do need to fight against old age. And the fight is not outside. The fight is inside each of us, challenging our limiting beliefs about old age, our negative attitudes about old age. Because guess what? We're old now. But how we behave in old age is crucial. So are you resigned or are you fighting? I'm fighting because I'm a rebel. That's why I'm asking you to join the rebellion, because you can't sit back and resign. If you do, it's over. Game over. Lesson number 6. The mind is a muscle that must be exercised. We touched on that earlier on. Learn a new language. You've got to keep learning new stuff, but learn something you love. You can't do this as a I have to, I ought to, I must. No, I want to. I have a desire for. You must love it. So old people maintain a sound mind as long as they're eager to learn. There's got to be that desire to learn. Resign yourself to retirement and it's over. Just look at the lives of people like Sophocles, Solon, Homer, Pythagoras, Plato. And he quotes all these people of his contemporaries, well, not his contemporaries, but people that he would have studied. And, all of them used their mind all the way to the end. They didn't surrender. And the question for you is, are you still eager to learn and apply yourself? I strongly urge you to. Use your mind, be eager to learn. Lesson number 7. Older people must stand up for themselves. Again, this is something I touched on earlier. I will touch it again. We have so many organizations now that are there to help us. And this is growing literally daily. And we have people in their 40s and 50s who are setting up businesses to serve boomers. And they're not ageist. We're the ageists. We boomers are the ageists. But we need to put these negative thoughts down and stand up for ourselves. We're not supposed to tiptoe to a quiet death. We're supposed to go out with a bang. So rise up. Old age is respected only if it defends itself, maintains its rights, and submits to no one. I'm going to repeat this because this is just superb. Old age is respected only if it defends itself, maintains its rights, and submits to no one. This is rebellion, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you, this is a rebellion, but it's not a rebellion outside. It's an internal rebellion. It's a rebellion against the old you, so the new you can emerge. Are you standing up for your rights and defending your position to yourself in your inner dialogue? This is about your internal battle, your inner dialogue. When those negative things, those negative voices come up, oh, I'm too old, I don't have money, there's no prospect for me, I have no friends. These negative, keep these loops on and you're on to a quiet death, mate. That's it, it's over for you. You need to repel those thoughts by standing up, rejecting those things. Remember, thoughts come into our heads, but we choose to accept them or dismiss them. Ensure that these negative thoughts you dismiss immediately. Lesson number 8. Sex is highly overrated. When I first read this, I fell off my chair. I thought it was brilliant. Sex for baby boomers has been sort of, for the males particularly, after the 60s revolution, it really did pivot our minds and took over our brains effectively. And for a long time, and I speak for myself, and I'm sure, and I know a lot of people feel this, is that, whether it's what we wanted was translated into films and TV, where sex started slipping in and became more and more and more of the story than the story itself. I mean, just look at the porn sites. It's a significant portion of what's on the internet. It's an obsession, and it's an obsession. It's like whether it's food or sex, it's highly overrated, and it needs to find its proper place. So, and I think Cicero is absolutely right. In his personal life, and I'd like to share this with you because he's not talking nonsense, because he has personal experience in here. He was married for a long time to his wife, Terentia, which was an arranged marriage, but that was quite common in Rome at the time. And it was also about socioeconomic reasons that people did that. And years later, I think after his daughter passed away, which was a huge blow to him, as you'd expect, but he shared his suffering about that, and I think he divorced his wife, and he divorced his wife because apparently she betrayed him, was what was said. But I don't believe it was about infidelity. I think it was a different form of betrayal. And in any event, after he divorced her, a year or so later, he married a young woman, a very young woman, someone who was not far from his late daughter's age. And within a year, he was divorced because he wasn't able to share anything with her. She couldn't understand him. He couldn't understand her. And that's why, and I suppose he married her because of the sex, but that's why he came with this thing. It is my understanding is that that's why he came out with this sex is highly overrated, because I think he suffered in that marriage with that young woman. So he just thought, I went in for the sex, but I mean, look at the price I had to pay. This is not my life. This is not what I want. So yes, I think I needed to put that in perspective, because, and it gets even more interesting, because it's not just him. He's quoting further philosophers and people ahead of him who talk about the most fatal curse given to men by nature is sexual desire. It's true, because men get completely sidetracked, and they just go down blind alleys because sexual desire is controlling them. And so Sophocles in old age said about sex, I have gladly escaped that cruel and savage master. I mean, the words of wisdom coming out of this is, I suddenly don't feel so bad. That, I feel that I've got some friends in Cicero and Sophocles. I don't know about you. And don't get me wrong, I love sex. It's just that I don't want it to be the central part of my life. And it doesn't have to be, obviously. Even though old age doesn't provide sex in abundance, it doesn't lack them completely. Phew, thank God for that. Lesson number 9, cultivate your own garden. I mean, cultivate your own garden. Clearly, back in medieval days, cultivating your own garden would have been something that's possible, even though I think for most people it probably wasn't. Only would have been possible for people of some means. But I think we need to take this in a different way. Cicero used to go on about the joys of farming as like a bank account, always returning principal with interest, because they could make money out of it. Today, I'm not sure that actually works in terms of the literal meaning of farming. Tending vines is the rejuvenation and delight of my old age. I can't get enough of it. I think for us, we need to ask ourselves, what is cultivating our own garden? What does it mean? First of all, what is our garden? Our garden is our ecosystem. Where is it that we're working in? What industry, what sector? Who are the people, the customers, the clients, or the suppliers that we're dealing with? What area are we working in? I believe that's our garden in a large sense of the word. And our specific job in that is what we exactly contribute to that. So are you cultivating your own garden? Are you cultivating your skill sets and what you do to help that community, that garden, if you like? And that's really essentially the question here. What is your tribe? Who are your customers? Who are the people you serve? And given that 1/3 of the world population is going to be people over the age of 80, over the age of 50, your garden is people like us, people who are our age group. Everybody needs service. You have an expertise that other people don't have. Find out what that is. Find your community and help create it. Cultivating your own garden. I'm not a gardener, but I do like a little bit of gardening from time to time, getting my hands in the soil, planting and weeding. There's a sort of a catharsis that happens when you do that. It makes you feel good when you've done a couple of hours of work there. And it will be the same when you cultivate your own garden, your own business. Cicero lessons 10 is death is not to be feared. I alluded to this earlier on. Death is our friend. Why? I know that in our society, death is poo-pooed. We don't talk about it. It's not a topic that anybody likes to talk about. But guess what? Death is with us every second of every day. We cannot avoid it. We don't need to talk about it, but it's there. And so if it's there, it's meant to be there for a reason. And if we focus on the knowledge that death is around us at any time, none of us are guaranteed to make it to the end of the day today. That should sharpen our minds into thinking, what am I doing with my life? Am I just messing about, not focused on what I need to do and what I want to do and what my dream is? Because each day is so precious. It's like a lifetime. Think about it. If you knew you had another 24 hours to live, that would be the length of your life. That is a lifetime. So if we make each day into a new life, don't bring in yesterday's problem today. Today's a fresh day. It's a clean slate. Start fresh, start clean. Now, some of you will tell me, yes, but I've got debts. Park that. Those are thoughts. It's not good or bad. They're just thoughts. Park it. You have a new day. How are you going to make the most of this new day? By helping others, by serving others, because by doing that is how you give yourself value. So, when the end comes, all that remains are the good and worthy deeds you've done in your life. A very Roman concept, and still holds true. Nature gives us our bodies to abide in only for a time as guests, not to make our home. Now, how many of us are guilty, and I put my hand up, that we look at our lives as though we're going to live a very long time, which is conceivable. And so we try to accumulate stuff and we try to have nice things, and which is nice. But what I'm saying is that when you recognize that our lifetime can be very short or very long, how we take each day is crucial. And we don't sort of start planning as though we're going to live an eternity. And recognize that the shortness of life is what makes it so sweet. Are you afraid to think of death, and are you aware of it each day and living optimally? Again, remember, people like Cicero in those days, their life could be snuffed in a nanosecond. Cicero had a lot of enemies, and he himself obviously feared death like any normal human, but he had perspective. Interestingly, he was himself assassinated when he was traveling from his home to the beach on the orders of Mark Antony and the triumvirates at the time, because they didn't like him. He was an outspoken orator for democracy, and he hated tyrants. And Mark Antony was a tyrant in the making. So he effectively, in the Senate, made a speech against Mark Antony, and he had the whole Senate vote to make Mark Antony an enemy of the Republic. Mark Antony never forgave him for that, and in fact, that cost him his life. But we'll move on for now. So, how to negotiate old age? I'm just taking a second to give you a little bit of background on this, because to show you the volatility in Rome. When the soldiers came to kill him, he recognized that what was up. So he said to the leader, "Please make it quick." And the man said yes, and literally just cut his throat. He died very quickly. And then, of course, I'm sorry to be gory, but Cicero was decapitated, and his hands, which had written the against Mark Antony were cut off as well, and his head and hands were taken to Rome and put on the Senate, near the Senate, to warn people, watch your mouth and don't write things you shouldn't write. Obviously, authoritarian tyrannies. And Mark Antony's wife, Fulvia, so hated him that she wanted to, she had his head brought to her, and she pulled out his tongue and she put nails in it because she hated him so much. Horrific. But I wanted to share with you, this is the man who was so responsible for the Renaissance and for the democratic constitution in the United States. He was responsible for so many good things, and yet his own personal life ended so gruesomely. But I'm sorry, I'm a Cicero fan, that's why I love talking about him. But so how to negotiate old age, I'm digressing. How to negotiate on old age. You have to have a sense of purpose. This is something that is big for me, and that's why my program is called Dare to Discover Your Purpose, because most people are not working on their purpose. They're working on things other people have told them is important. So you need to rediscover your purpose, because retirement is knocking on your door and telling you, wake up. Don't lose your dream. This is the last part of your life where you can actually implement your dream. Keep working on what interests you. It's got to interest you. You can't do it because you have to, or because you have to supplement your income. That's a death trap. Keep the brain alert, exercise the memory and learn new things. Maintain regular conversation with friends. Trouble about retirement is that people get ashamed of their position and they withdraw and they stop communicating. And that creates a new sort of lack of self-esteem, and that leads to isolation and loneliness, and it's over. You have to fight this. Offer the experience of age to the young. Enjoy moderate exercise, food, and drink. The operative word here, moderate. I speak to myself too. Accept your limitations and relax into being old. Acknowledge it is a good thing that death awaits you. And the last words from Cicero today is, and this is a saying which I totally love, old age is the crown of life, the final act in the play of life. So you had a great start in your life, you had a great middle, you took everything all the way up to the top, and then comes retirement and you just go down the cliff. That's what we've been doing the last 70 years. This is wrong. We have another mountain to climb, and we need energy, enthusiasm, love for what we do. But we've got to stop that negative talk, that negative internal talk about ageism. Let's not look outside to blame other people. Let's not try to change the laws. It's what's in our minds, what's in our heads that needs to be stopped. Everything else will fall into place. I thank you, and I thank you in Latin too. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. I think that old age is a miracle. It's the opportunity for us to take advantage and to really do what we were meant to do. And as boomers, we have fought against everything in our lives. Why should we surrender now to old age? So pick up your musket, fight the inner fight, the good fight, and go out there and enjoy doing what you love to do. Thank you, and welcome to the Retirement Rebellion.